Okay, so what if you don't want an Apple Watch, you don't want the Galaxy Watch Ultra, you don't want a Garmin, for instance, but you still want something that is attractive, fast, and has great battery life? This year, I haven't worn my Apple Watch Ultra for most of the year, actually, and that's because I've been wearing things like the Garmin Mark Commander. I promise, I keep saying this, I know, I promise I'll do something on this channel with this watch at some point this year. But also, very recently, I've discovered the Galaxy Watch Ultra from Samsung, which is brilliant. It's been an interesting year when it comes to whatever has been on my wrist, and the eagle-eyed amongst you, people who watch this channel fairly regularly, will have noticed that in a few videos I was wearing this. And lots of people kept, well, a few people kept saying, "What's that on your wrist?" Well, it's the OnePlus Watch 2R. It's my first ever experience of a OnePlus watch, and spoiler, it's really good. This is for several reasons, which I'll get straight into after we've gone through the specs and the pricing. Okay, so these watches have loads of specs, which does mean that I have to read from this iPad in front of me. Please bear with me. The Watch 2R is made from aluminium alloy and it has a silicone strap. Combined, they weigh 59 grams, which isn't very much at all. It's got a 1.43-inch circular AMOLED display with 600 nits of default brightness and 1000 nits of peak brightness. The battery is 500 milliamp hours, which has a smart mode of up to 100 hours of use or 48 hours of heavy use, and a power saving mode that promises 12 days of battery life. It's also capable of fast charging, so if you've got the right plug, a 60-minute charge will give you 100% battery, and a 10-minute charge will give you 24 hours of use. Inside, we've got the Snapdragon W5 Gen 1, and there's also another chip called the BES 2700, which helps with power management and battery saving. There's 2 gigabytes of RAM, 32 gigabytes of ROM, which you can use for loading up music, and it's IP68 water resistant and 5 ATM water resistant as well, so you can go pretty deep with this. There's loads of sensors: accelerometer, gyroscope, optical heart rate sensor, optical pulse oximeter, geomagnetic sensor, light sensor, barometer, NFC. There's dual frequency GPS. It runs Wear OS 4 and it comes in gunmetal grey and forest green, which is this one here. And finally, it costs 249 quid in the UK, although quite often with OnePlus you can get some very tasty discounts if you buy one of their phones, etc. as well. Basically, it's not very expensive, and that spec list, apart from being very hard to read out, is impressive. So we are off to a very good start. Whenever I wear a watch on this channel that isn't an Apple Watch, some people notice it. You might be one of those people who dives into the comments straight away and says, "Mark, what's that on your wrist? It's not an Apple Watch. Who made it? How much is it? When are you reviewing it? What is going on?" I completely get it, because the Apple Watch is fairly ubiquitous these days, and whenever you see something slightly different on the wrist, particularly of a tech creator who reviews a lot of Apple stuff, it's immediately interesting, and that's one of the things that I love about the OnePlus Watch 2R. It's interesting, it's got a circular design, it looks more expensive than it is thanks to that shiny metal well, it's not shiny, some of it is shiny, in fact it is shiny. Basically it's a lovely looking watch. I do worry about how much that will scratch over time. I've been wearing this for quite a while now, and well, actually it's still pristine, but it looks like the sort of casing that potentially could pick up a few nicks here and there, but that would add character, wouldn't it? I think like anything, even my Apple Watch Ultra has picked up nicks over the last couple of years, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. It just looks lovely. The one thing that it doesn't have is a rotating bezel here. You just get 2 buttons, but I haven't really missed that, to be completely honest, and the buttons that are there, well, they do a job, and equally pretty much everything you can do on the display these days. You don't need that tactile feedback, even though it's quite nice on a watch. So that's the only thing I'd say about the design that I think is missing, is a rotating bezel, but again, I can live without that. But in terms of cost savings, the only thing I've noticed is the plastic rear casing, which you never see because it's just, well, it's hidden. But everything else feels very premium, which is very good news, because it means that as soon as you get this out of the box, it feels like you're getting a lot for your money. It uses 2D glass on the display, which isn't as robust apparently as sapphire crystal, but I have been wearing this for quite a while and I've not been treating it with kid gloves at all. I've done the whole bashing it into doorways or, door frames and things, and as it stands, let me give it a quick polish. It is completely mint. It's basically completely scratch free. The only thing I'm not keen on is the charging puck, which is detachable and therefore I think fairly easy to lose if you're an idiot like me. And that does mean that if you've got a much longer USB-C cable, for instance, like this one, you can plug your charging puck in and happy days. I just know what I'm like, and I think I'll probably lose this, but maybe that's my problem. So in terms of design, it's a lovely looking watch in my opinion, and there are very few caveats. There's very few downsides so far about this OnePlus Watch 2R. But let's talk about performance. If you're new to this channel, I should confirm that I don't do benchmarks because I'd rather connect my teeth to the mains. When it comes to smartwatches, my test is so simple and I think ingenious. It's basically one question, which is, does this watch feel like an Apple Watch? And I know that makes me sound like a massive Apple fanboy, but I am. I don't care. And the reason I ask that question is because the Apple Watch, I think, is still the pinnacle of smartwatches. When you get that combination of hardware and software that just works and is fluid and buttery smooth and just a joy to use, that is what every other smartwatch should try and be like. And the good news is, after I think many years of that not being the case with the competition, we have got to a point now where the likes of the Galaxy Watch Ultra and the Huawei Watch Fit 3 and now the OnePlus Watch 2R are just as good as the Apple Watch. This one features a Snapdragon chip, so no weird kind of in-house chip. It never lags, it never does anything weird. You don't kind of go, come on, do something. It just works, again, like an Apple Watch. It just looks different, so it's got a different operating system, it's got a circular design, and immediately it's interesting. And if you've been using an Apple Watch for a number of years and you've got a bit bored of it, this is such a refreshing change. It's got 100 plus sports modes, it's got the Relax app, it's got sleep monitoring, and everything connects to O Health, which is OnePlus's health app. And this is my kind of health app. And the reason for that is because it's easy to use. The likes of Garmin, they have incredibly detailed reporting in their apps, but it's just mind-numbingly difficult to work out unless you're a proper runner. I'm not. I do 5k on the treadmill and a few weights. That's what I do basically. So I need very basic information, but I need it presented in a way that makes me want to dive in, and O Health does that very well. It's got 3 tabs. The first one is Health, which gives you an overview of your key metrics, so heart rate, steps, calories, stress, all the normal stuff. Then we have the Fitness tab, which records all of your workouts, so you can see your past runs, etc. Basically, you can combine all of the stats from your previous workouts into one report, which is very nice. And then we have the Device tab, which is where you have all the controls and configuration for the watch. Thus far, it's doing very well. But the next big thing is the battery. So I think the battery life is one of the main differentiating factors between smartwatches, and it's hard, it's really difficult. And the reason we know this is because Garmin achieves days and sometimes weeks worth of battery, and the way that they do that is by having watches that are smartwatches, but they are very fitness focused, and everything is about battery life. It's about squeezing as much battery life out of them as possible, and as a result of that, they don't do quite as many things as a regular smartwatch. A regular smartwatch, even if it's an ultra version like the Galaxy Watch Ultra or the Apple Watch Ultra, will last a maximum of 3 days. And that's really pushing it. Most of these watches, even the Ultra versions, in my experience, are 2-day watches. So I thought I'd do a test with the Watch 2R by taking it to London for 2 days without the charging puck and just seeing how it fares with everyday use. Again, I don't do any kind of battery benchmark testing with watches. I just use them as normal. And it fared really well. So I charged it up to 100% that morning. I went to the gym straight away, did a workout for about an hour, left there, went to the train station, got to London, did loads of walking around using maps, so basically using Google Maps as my navigation on this watch. Woke up the next day without having charged it, and it still had 62% remaining. And on day 2, I carried on walking around in the morning using navigation and checking notifications, all the normal smartwatch stuff. stuff, and by midday it still had 51% remaining, and I carried on. I carried on using navigation that afternoon. I didn't need to charge it until the next day, basically. So it is, once again, a 2/3 day watch, depending on what you do with it. If you don't, if you're not doing all that navigation, if you're not doing workouts and stuff like that, you can probably get 3 days out of this watch relatively easily, which means it's very impressive. For my use case, it's still a 2-day watch, but it just gives me a little bit more headroom than I've been used to with certain other watches, including regular Apple Watches. Okay, before I wrap up this review, just 2 very quick comparisons for the Watch 2R. The first one is with the Watch 2, which is the other OnePlus Watch. That's more expensive, and the reason it's more expensive is because it uses stainless steel for the case and sapphire crystal for the display. So in theory, it should be a bit more robust. That's pretty much the only difference, and it does mean that the Watch 2R is 25% lighter than the Watch 2. So if you want a lighter OnePlus watch, get this. The last comparison is between this and the Apple Watch SE, which I don't have to hand, I'm afraid, but they're fairly similar in terms of performance. In fact, very similar, identical in terms of performance, battery life, and even the operating system. Even though it looks different, they do the same stuff, basically. The big difference is circular versus square, and the fact that you have 2 size choices with the Apple Watch SE, so you get 44mm and 40mm. The Watch 2R doesn't have fall detection, the Apple Watch SE does. And then we have the fact that the Watch 2R has Google Assistant and the Apple Watch SE has Siri. And at the time of making this video, Siri is terrible, and Google Assistant is fantastic. But the thing that will drive your decision between the Apple Watch SE and the Watch 2R is whether or not you love the Apple ecosystem and you use an iPhone. If that's you, get the Apple Watch SE. If you're not that bothered about the Apple ecosystem or you don't have an iPhone, get this. And that's my conclusion about the Watch 2R. It feels like an Apple Watch. It doesn't look anything like it. It's completely different. It's, I think, much more attractive. It's much more traditional, thanks to the circular display. It's one hell of a watch, and for 249 quid, I think it's a bit of a bargain. And if you pair it with a Nord 4 smartphone, you've got a brilliant setup. If you want to see my review of that smartphone, keep watching for a link.